Hey guys, let me ask you a question. Do you think the move queen takes d4 is a good move in this position? Well, if you said yes, you think that's a good move, then you might want to stick around and watch this video because this is actually a big mistake, and I'm going to tell you why in just a second. Hey guys, so in my chess skills blueprint, if you scroll down to the intermediate tactics and look at the first sub-skill there, you'll see trapped pieces. This is an essential part of tactics that you have to be aware of. These types of situations pop up all the time in different ways. And so in this video, I wanted to cover 8 of the most common ways that you will see trapped pieces. You can get this spreadsheet on my course website. There's a link in the description. Everything's on sale for the month of August. So if you haven't taken advantage of that, go ahead and do that. But having said that, let's get into the video. All right, so first on our list, we have the Noah's Ark Trap. Now, if you're wondering, this position that I showed you earlier is actually a very common mistake that people make out of the Ruy Lopez. So if we go back, you can see the main line here. This is just standard Ruy Lopez, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles. b5 is a little bit early. Sometimes people will play bishop e7, but if you go for this line, b5, d6, and white just immediately plays d4, you have to be careful because after this trade happens, if white recaptures, they've already just lost a piece. After the move c5 forces the queen away with tempo. It doesn't really matter where you move your queen to. The next move, black's going to play c4. And this bishop is now stuck. You can't retreat. You don't want to go here. You don't want to take the pawn. You just lost a bishop. Okay. This is called the Noah's Ark Trap, when the 3 pawns kind of expand forward and trap a bishop. There are different versions of this, which I'll get to in just a second. But this is kind of the most common one, I believe. So the Noah's Ark Trap, got to watch out for that. And one of the easiest ways to prevent this from happening is to make sure that you give your bishop a place to go to. And one of the easiest ways to do that, especially in the Ruy Lopez, is play the move c3. So that's why you see a lot of strong players will play c3 before they play d4. And now at any point in the future, if this pawn comes up, you don't have to worry about your bishop being trapped because you can always drop back c2. And this is a great diagonal for the bishop and you just don't lose it, right? So keep that in mind, especially when the knight moves and there's potentially 3 pawns that can come forward, the bishop can be trapped. All right, next on our list is actually another version of the Noah's Ark Trap that you might see from time to time. So I want you to take a look at this game, and it starts out very normal, and then it kind of gets weird. So black plays bishop d6, kind of a weird looking move. We're just going to castle, let's just say. Then black plays the knight back, again, kind of a weird looking move. And we play d3, and now black plays the move a5. And it's like, what is black even doing? Like, this just looks terrible. We don't care. We're going to develop our pieces. And all of a sudden, black plays the move c6. We're like, okay, we go back. And next thing you know, b5, bishop b3, and a4. And notice this. The bishop is again trapped. Where are you going to go to, right? And so we lost a piece because we didn't see what black was doing. So keep this in mind. This happens. It's not super common, but does happen from time to time. If you have a bishop that's kind of just sitting out here, it can happen on either side, really. And your opponent just pushes a pawn like this. Keep in mind, the idea could be that later they want to use that pawn to trap your bishop, and they're gaining a tempo ahead of time to make it less obvious. So what I mean by that is black could have also played c6, you go back, they play b5, you go back, and now they play a5, threatening to trap your bishop. But this is extremely obvious, right? Like, we're like, oh, I see what they're going to do, and we're going to make some move like a3 to give our bishop a place to, go to. We're not going to play knight c3 now and let them trap it, right? So that's why playing it early is kind of, a little bit tricky, and you have to understand what might be going on, all right? And you can use the same tactic yourself. I flip the board. If your opponent's bishop is just kind of sitting out there, if you don't have a knight on c6 or on f6 where they can trade it for, and you'd like to try to trap their bishop, this could be an idea. Now, I have to caution you, you have to be careful doing this in a situation like this where we haven't castled, we haven't developed. Playing moves like this can get you into trouble. And so, like, for example, if white would have just played the move d4, start to open up the center, gives the bishop places to go to, now black's position is not very good. Okay, so this is not always a plan that you want to go for. I just want you to know that it's an option, and it's available in some cases and can be a tricky way to trap your opponent's bishops. All right, so the next 2 on our list are very similar. So I'm going to show you one and then show you the other real quick, but it's called the greedy bishop or greedy knight pawn grab. It's just my own name for it. But here's a position. It's white to play. they play bishop takes a7 because they think, oh, free pawn. Well, a lot of times when you take these pawns with your bishops or with your knights, which we'll see in just the next example, they can just get trapped very easily by a pawn moving forward. And how's the bishop going to escape? And next move, as black, I'm just going to simply play king b7 and take the bishop, right? So don't be taking those pawns unless you calculate what's going to happen after these two moves. Now, sometimes there are ways around this. Like, for example, if white had a bishop sitting over here on b6, you could play bishop to a6, and that would actually be checkmate, right? Because the rook is helping out here. So sometimes you can get away with it. You just have to plan and calculate what's going to happen if they try to trap you. Another example, if I jump over here, it can happen with the knight. Usually it looks something like this. The knight comes in, threatens the pawn, and what you can do instead of defending it, a lot of times a better option is to just play c6. Now this actually probably wasn't the greatest example because knight d6 check. Actually, knight d6 check doesn't even work. There's a little tactic there. You can just take it because you've got the threat. I didn't even plan this, but that actually works out nicely. So if they take you, you're going to take the rook with check and you win a piece. And if they take this way, you're going to take the rook and also defend your rook. So that's kind of funny. So it does work unintentionally. But yeah, so c6 is a good move here. And of course, if the knight tries to take it, you simply slide the king over and the knight is trapped, has to give itself up, you know, for the pawn. And so same kind of idea. A lot of times taking the a7 or h7 pawn or a2 or h2 pawn with a knight or a bishop, you have to be really careful that those minor pieces don't just get trapped, and it's more trouble than it's worth trying to get those pawns. All right, next on our list is when a knight gets itself trapped behind pawns. So we're going to look at the Alekhine's defense. Knight to f6, not super common, but most common move here is e5, and then most of the time black plays knight to d5. The reason is knight to e4 really isn't a great idea because now the knight starts to get kicked around. You go to c5, you get chased around again, and if you try to come back to e4, nice centralized square, the problem is you get trapped by f3. You notice there's nowhere that the knight can move to safely. All of these squares are covered, right? The bishop's controlling this, and then we have pawns on all of these guys. So the knight's just trapped. And you lose a piece. So be careful bringing your knight forward when it's attacked by a pawn. You always want to make sure that you have a retreat square. If you don't, be very careful going forward. That's why knight to d5 is actually a better move, because you can always hop over to b6 if you need to get away. Whereas on e4, once this happens, you're out of luck. Okay. Now we're going to come back to this exact same position in just a minute later on in the list. So don't go anywhere because you're going to want to see what happens next. There's something very interesting about this position. But let's go ahead and jump to the next one. So we talked a lot about knights and bishops getting trapped. Now it's time to talk about rooks. And one of the common ones that I remember seeing is a situation like this, where white is contemplating taking a free pawn. And if they take it, what move can we play here as black? Well, since you know this video is about trapping pieces, hopefully you could spot bishop to b6. And what we've done is trapped the rook. Of course, it doesn't want to give itself up for a bishop or a pawn, right? And it can't move. And so we're threatening to either come here with our queen and attack it, or potentially even to use our knight and attack it like this. Now, Stockfish says it can kind of get a little crazy in this particular example where the queen can come down and some, you know, maybe white can sacrifice and get some decent compensation. But still, this is something you want to keep in mind, because a lot of times you can't get compensation and you're just actually just losing a rook if you grab that pawn. So the way you want to think about this, if we flip the board, is when you're thinking about taking a pawn, ask yourself, are there any pieces that could prevent the rook from coming backwards, right? And in this case, it's pretty obvious. Yes, the bishop can go to b6. Now, there's not always that available, but if it is, you want to think twice before you grab that pawn. All right, so now let's go ahead and jump back to this position that I mentioned earlier. And let's just say black is like, okay, well, I'm going to lose my knight, but I at least have a little trick up my sleeve. And they play the move e6. We take the knight, and they play queen to h4 check. Now, if you're wondering, the best move in this position is just to play king to d2. Even though it looks kind of scary, we're actually fine, and the game goes on. Yes, black can take this pawn, but we're going to be just fine, develop our pieces, and we're up a piece. But some people might be tempted to play the move g3 to stop the queen like this. This actually opens you up to queen takes e4, and now you're losing the rook. But here's a really interesting idea that I want you to keep in mind. Sometimes this happens, okay? You're playing the game, you weren't paying attention. Next thing you know, the queen comes out, you block it, and it comes over, right? And you're going to lose a rook. Sometimes what you can do is play the move king to f2. All right. And after black takes, you play the move knight to f3. And what I want you to notice is, where can black's queen move to? Well, the answer is nowhere. You can't take the pawn, it's defended. You can't go here. You can't take the bishop, everything's defended, right? The queen's just trapped. But we're not attacking the queen. And here's the issue. Bishop to g2 looks like a really nice move, except our queen is going to be captured. Okay, so what we need to do is get our queen out of the way, do something with our bishop, because that would also be undefended, and then we want to play bishop to g2. Now, usually when this happens, these positions are very complicated, because of course black's not going to just sit around, oh yeah, I guess I just lost my queen, okay, I'll just resign now. No, like, they're going to try to find a way to save the queen. And in this example, actually, before I tell you, if you'd like to pause, what do you think black can play here to actually help save their queen? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is b6. And the point is, black's going to fianchetto the bishop here and put pressure on this knight, because if black can trade the knight, then there's no longer a defender on h2, and the queen can simply take it, and it's probably going to get away at that point, right? So, like, for example, let's say we play queen d2, trying to get ready to play bishop g2 and trap this. Now we have bishop to b7, and we can actually still play bishop to g2, but now after bishop takes f3, black actually gets a bunch of pieces. So that's kind of one idea. The other idea, like I said, would be they could just trade the knight and then the queen would escape. But this is another example of how, okay, we did get the queen, but I don't know, black has, you know, if you kind of do the math here, black has a rook and a bishop and an extra pawn. And so it's probably still better for white, but, you know, you can see how black is staying in the game, right? That's just one example. Sometimes the bishop comes out to g4 and causes problems. Sometimes there's another knight that's more active that kind of starts jumping in and messes up your plan of trapping the queen. And so you kind of have to judge the position. They're always going to be different, but keep this idea in mind of moving your king, bringing out the knight, and then getting ready to play bishop to g2, right? And like I said, the easiest way to do that would be queen to d2 in this case, because you get your queen off of the back and you defend the bishop at the same time, setting up bishop to g2 next. And it's pretty satisfying when you do trap the queen in that manner. All right, guys, and last but certainly not least, to reward you for sticking around to the end of this video, I'm going to show you a really unique way that a queen can get trapped. So let's take a look at this example game. So d4, c5, this is the old Benoni gambit accepted, where the queen comes out right away, which is playable. There's nothing terribly wrong with this yet. e4, knight f6, knight f3, d6, bishop to e3, and now is when black decides to go down the wrong path, playing queen b4, going hunting for this pawn. And if you'd like to pause and think through what's a really clever move that we can play here as white, go ahead and do that. All right, if you had a chance to do that, the move is a3, threatening to just take the queen. And of course, it looks like we're ignoring this, and at the same time, we're going to have to deal with a threat on our knight with check afterwards. Why would we do this? The point is that after black takes, we play the amazing move knight to a4. By the way, knight to b5 is also a really strong move, but knight to a4, and where do you think black's queen is going now? Not here, not here, not here, not here, not here, not here, or 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 here. It's trapped. It's pretty amazing. It looks like the queen would have lots of options, and yet because of the way our pieces are placed, everybody's doing an important job. The queen is simply trapped. So keep this idea in mind. It doesn't work all the time because you kind of have to have a lot of pieces in place, you know, for it to work. But when it is, you know, set up this way, it's very tricky and a nice way to trap the queen. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something about trapping pieces. Like I said, the blueprint is available on my website. Check out the link below. It's on sale for the month of August. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.